Many have tried to explain the Trinity, but never have we have someone claim to be able to explain it in 3 minutes. Even Christians will admit that the Trinity has to be one of the stupidest thing. No, they won't say stupid. They won't admit that it's stupid. They will just say it's hard to understand, even though it's just plainly stupid. This video claims to be able to explain the Trinity in 3 minutes. Let's get into the video.
In the Trinity, there is said to be three distinct persons: the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and each of the persons is fully God. Now, stopping there, it would appear that Christians actually worship three gods. However, nowhere in the Bible or Christian tradition does the Trinitarian concept become a tritheism, meaning three gods. God is always
Yeah, because the Trinity is really not in the Bible. It's a made up thing outside of the Bible. Jesus is not God, and God is in Jesus. It's outside of the Bible. It's a concept Christians literally made up. But they will look into the Bible and change verses, bend backwards to try to make sense and say, well, it's in the Bible. It was always there, even when it's not. Again, trying to explain something that clearly doesn't make sense.
declared as one, which turns this doctrine into quite a mind bender. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are said to share one nature, but the Father is not the same person as the Son, who is not the same person as the Holy Spirit, who is not the same person as the Father. They are three distinct persons in one substance, essence, or nature.
Three people in one person, three different people in one person. They all equal and they're not the same people. They're not the same people, but it's the same people. It's three different people and they all are the same one person. This is not like like if you draw up a pie chart, this is not like you just put out three lines and it's different thing, but it's in one circle. This is not what they're saying. This is three all different circles, all as one. Three different circles all in one. Just picture that for a second. Does that make any sense?
Chronicles of Narnia author C.S. Lewis suggests that humans shouldn't be able to fully grasp a being that is beyond our three-dimensional world, and uses this following example. If you are using only one dimension, you can draw only a straight line. If you are using two, you could draw a figure, say a square, and a square is made up of four straight lines. Now a step further, if you have three dimensions, you can then build what we call a solid body, say a cube, a thing like a dice or a lump of sugar, and a cube is made up of 6 squares. He's making the point that a world of one dimension would be a straight line. In a two-dimensional world, you still get straight lines, but many lines make one figure. And in a three-dimensional world, you still get figures, but many figures make one solid body. In other words, as you advance to more real and more complicated levels, you do not leave behind you the things you found on the simpler levels. You still have them, but combined in new ways, in ways you could not imagine if you knew only the simpler levels. Now the
How is
Christian
this applying to God? We shall find out.
account of God involves just the same principle. The human level is a simple and rather empty level. On the human level, one person is one being, and any two persons are two separate beings. Just as in two dimensions, one square is one figure, and any two squares are two separate figures. On the divine level, you still find personalities, but up there you find them combined in new ways which we, who do not live on that level, cannot imagine. In God's dimension, so to speak, you find a being who is three persons while remaining one being. Just
So
as
we
a
appeal into something like humans can't understand it. We can't understand God's way, so it makes sense. Something that clearly doesn't make sense. All of a sudden, make sense. You see, that's what you call BS. It doesn't make sense from our perspective, and the Bible is saying God is not a God of confusion. We're clearly supposed to understand God. That's the entire point of the Bible, to understand God more, to understand His ways, to understand Him, and to understand basically as much as we can about Him. If the Trinity is in the Bible, then there's an explanation of how we can understand the Trinity. If we can't find that in the Bible, then it's either God doesn't want us to understand Him, or maybe you're just making out of your ass, or maybe it's all just BS. It's option two and three. The Trinity still doesn't make sense, people. Even with all this jumbo nonsense, you're not explaining the Trinity. You're saying we can't understand it, but it makes sense in some other dimension.
Cube is 6 squares, while remaining one cube. Of course, Lewis admits we cannot fully conceive a being like that, just as if we were so made that we perceived only 2 dimensions in space, we could never properly imagine a cube. But we can get a sort of faint notion of it, and when we do, we are then, for the first time in our lives, getting some positive idea, however faint, of something super personal, something more than a person. It is something we could never have guessed, and yet once we have been told, one almost feels one ought to have been able to guess it, because it fits in so well with all the things we know already. The doctrine of the Trinity is the
It's not even the same thing as like a box or a dimension. Like if you have a 3D shape, it's still one thing, it's just different sides of it. It's not entirely three different things. You're saying God is three entirely different people at the same time, just one person. It's not like a box or a 3D shaped item where it's the same item just from different side. We could see more. You could see the inside, you could see different dimensions of it. It's 3D, you could roll it around and see all the corners. That's not the same as what you're trying to explain as God, which is three all different people, not the same thing, but at the same time, the same thing. All equal in power, all the same people.
most difficult idea in Christianity, and yet one of the most fundamental. It instructs Christians on who God is, how He is to be worshipped, and how God interacts with humanity. A more thorough study on the Trinity is encouraged using the
Hold on.
links in the
So, let's listen to that again because this is one of the things I was trying to point out earlier. Let's listen to that again.
in Christianity, and yet one of the most fundamental. It instructs Christians on who God is, how He is
It
to be
instructs
worshipped,
Christians of who God is, but we don't even understand exactly what the Trinity means. That's the entire point of this explanation, that we can't understand it. But it's supposed to show us who God is and how we can worship Him. How can you worship something when you have no idea what exactly it is? The God of no confusion, but here we are, not even understanding the attributes of God, being the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, different people, but the same person.
and how God interacts with humanity.
Oh, and how God interacts with humanity. So if we can't understand this, how do we even know how we interact with God and how God interacts with us? We can't. And this is one of the fundamental things in Christianity. And Christians don't get it, and nobody else get it, but we're supposed to believe based on faith that all of it make sense. Our salvation is supposed to come from something that clearly is just stupid. We're supposed to understand this to understand God that we are supposed to worship for our entire life. And when we die, because there's an afterlife, when we die and end up in heaven, we're doing the same thing. If we can't even understand this divine God, how do we worship? How do we understand Him? How do we interact with something we clearly have no idea of what it is? Others are just claims upon claims, and when you actually look at the details, when you look at the claims, you see that they actually have no evidence for any of the claims, and they're just making bunch of it on each other. The Trinity doesn't make sense, people. It's not just difficult to understand, it doesn't make sense. Well, that's all I have for you today. Apparently, that was an explanation of the Trinity in 3 minutes, more like a BS in 3 minutes. Thank you for watching and have a great day, people.